what happens to my time of arrival based on the speed that I'm driving. So I noticed as I'm going along here, I put in my destination in my GPS, and it goes and it tells me my estimated time of arrival. And generally speaking, that's been pretty good, fairly accurate. And I know it's based on traffic factors and other things that go on. But what happens when I speed up? That time generally doesn't change a whole lot. And it's kind of interesting how that works, and I wanted to kind of explain why that happened. The important thing to remember is that when your time of arrival is based on the distance divided by your speed, so you have to kind of think about it in those terms. But let's take a look at what happens when I change my speed. I started off by setting a destination that was about 70 miles away. I was going about 50 miles an hour on the highway, and I see that it's going to take me an hour and 13 minutes to get there. And I'll arrive with about 40% of my battery. Now I speed up to 60 miles an hour, and I see that I'll arrive in an hour and 12 minutes, it's a minute later now, and I'll get there with about 40% of my battery. Then I sped up to 70 miles an hour. At 70 miles an hour, I found that I would get there in an hour and 11 minutes. Again, it's a little bit later, and I'll arrive there with about 40% of my battery. And then finally, I did a quick turn up to 80 miles an hour. And when I got to 80 miles an hour, I found that I would get there in an hour and 11 minutes and be there with about 40% of my battery. So what does this tell me? So I know that the GPS doesn't take into consideration my driving habits. It's only looking at the road conditions and where we are. So if I plot out on a chart 70 miles away, different speeds, you can kind of get a sense of when you're going at a very slow speed, it will in fact take a long time to get there. But once you reach a stable speed, like around 50 miles an hour, the decrease in time is actually very small. So we can see that at 50 miles an hour, it should take 1.4 hours to get there. If we're going 60 miles an hour, it should take 1.16 hours to get there. If we're going at 70 miles an hour, it should take about an hour to get there. And if we're going at 80 miles an hour, it should take 0.8 of an hour, which is about 48 minutes. Now, why didn't it show that on the screen here? Because there are other traffic factors up ahead. I have to drive on some city streets at some point when I get there. So what I can see is that the difference in time when you're about 70 miles from your destination really doesn't matter what speed you go. You could go somewhere between 50 and 80 miles an hour and get there at the same time. In fact, there's a mathematical equation that shows you what the relationship is between your speed and a speed increase and a decrease in time. It's a pretty straight line formula when you look at it. Now, if we plot it out at different distances, we can see there is a greater effect on some of the greater distances, of course, but the time difference is still fairly small among them. So what can I say about that? There's no need to speed. You're not going to get there any faster.